Horizon it's an old Greek word, ancient Greek word, which means bounding circle. So I guess when they thought about the earth, they thought that that edge, that line of the earth that you could see was the bounding circle. So I thought that was interesting, the idea that the work was a sphere and that the effect of the work to ultimately flip the view upside down, the line of the horizon became the only constant element. So you could actually line up the horizon in exactly the same place, but the world was inverted along that axis. When I talk about my sculptures, the ones that I've made, especially the ones that are site-specific, I've always talked about the approach and the idea that it's really important to have more than one view, and that first impression, the first time you see it or the first time you notice it, is the most important moment, really. When we were young, we did a lot of travelling, and the first time I saw the Sagrada Familia, just passing it really quickly in the car, and it was sort of like seeing an illusion or something, seeing a mirage. I'm not a traditional sculptor. I don't physically make or craft the final result. I might make a model or a prototype. I do a lot of drawing. Everything's developed through drawings, but I'm not personally building it. You know, with Horizon, we had a big team of people. The fabrication team were in the States. My engineer was in Sydney. I've worked with some amazing surveyors. My other work, Alchemy, for Sculpture by the Sea, that I think I counted about 32 people on that team. With my sculptures, the ideas feel like they come out of nowhere. It's not a slow thing, it's quite a fast thing. You'll suddenly have the idea, and by the time it gets there, it's quite well resolved in your head. I know that site very well, so I say that the ideas come out of nowhere, but I also spend a lot of time next to the ocean. This object at home was a toy from Venice that was a gift, and it was filled with a kind of fluid, and we live near the beach, so I could see the ocean and I could see this object, and I could see what the light was doing in the way that it was distorting the views and the reflections. And straight away I thought, okay, you know, we need to make a giant one. After being accepted into the exhibition, I think it took about 3 months of research and engineering to actually find the right fabricators to make the work. Yeah, I think that was it. That's the very first sketch. I think I seek out the idea, and the idea always calls for usually just one material, maybe two. I'm interested in keeping it quite limited. I'm not trying to tell a personal story with the works. The narrative is the material itself, and the material is the site. That's why I think you could call it conceptual art, I guess, because if you explain the idea and the action of the work, and people understand it, then I guess that's a conceptual piece. Maybe I don't even have to make these sculptures, maybe I could just describe them. I'm really fascinated by the way that the water looks different every day. It's every day, different colour, different texture, every day. So with this work, I knew that one of the strongest aspects would be that it would be different every day, because it pulled in the view. It was made of everything around it, sky and the ocean. So it had that amazing changing qualities of weather and also people, but I think what I'm really interested in is those textures of the landscape and the way that it would always be different. It would never look the same. The first time we really saw it, we put it on the plinth and unwrapped it. It's kind of wrapped in a shrink wrap, like a Glad wrap. And then we started feeling the water. So it was a kind of slow process, and everyone was looking at it like, yeah, it's a big sphere. It looks good. And then as the water was filling and it was slow, suddenly it started to come alive. And there were lots of people walking back and forth, and a little kid with his mum ran up, and he was having so much fun with it, because as it was filling, it sort of got to his head height, and he was loving it. He was actually talking to people and not having them say, oh, well done, it's amazing, but having them say, keep going, like, don't stop working, keep kit making work. For me, that is the most powerful thing, because it can be an exhausting experience, and having them actually encourage you to do what you do, that's the most precious thing. And also having kids ask why there weren't starfish in it was a pretty good question as well. The closer that you go to the work, the more distorted it is. You pick up more colour, and the view starts to really kind of wrap around and become much more curved. I think that movement of the waves, it made it quite hypnotic, and I think that's one of the reasons people were sort of standing and watching for a long time. So you would see the waves really rolling through constantly, this really steady movement, and it was really strong. It made the work really active. The other really interesting thing was at sunrise, the fact that people would come and watch the sunrise sort of backwards through the work. I was awarded the Lempriere Scholarship in 2013 for the work Horizon. The key focus for me was to travel and to take time out from my studio and to be able to explore. I first went to Venice, and from Venice up through Switzerland, Austria, across to Paris, and then down through Montenegro and Croatia. So I left in June in 2014, and I had a sort of itinerary, and I was really interested in travelling by train, because it's a really inspirational and easy way to get around, and you see a lot, and for me it gives me time to write and think and draw. This one was probably one of the most beautiful things that I saw. I took a lot of photos, but this was a little sketch. It was a fallen angel. He fell off off the top of one of the churches. I think this was one of my favourite things to do, was sketch, spend some time in the spaces inside a church or in the square sketching. Yeah, it's a beautiful square. I think the impressive thing about travelling to these places is when they're sort of back in time. I did develop a lot of concepts during that trip, and they're all sort of quietly waiting for the right opportunity to come out, and it's having the time to develop those ideas that can grow into something bigger. I think it gave me a chance to reflect on the work that I had done, sort of to look at the portfolio and then to think about the kind of work that I wanted to do, and to try and set up those kind of philosophies and understand where the inspiration comes from and how to make it work.